I'm truly honored and delighted to introduce our Shabbat Shuvah speaker, Bobbi Samuels. I met Bobbi and her late husband, Vic, in 2003, just days after I arrived to Houston. They graciously and generously included us in their 4th of July party, where we got to meet their children and a grandchild or two. Over the years, there have been many times of connection and gathering and conversation. I quickly realized that Bobbi and Vic were the kind of people who leaned in, rolled up their sleeves, and are passionate about Judaism and community. When around town, I feel a great sense of pride being one of their rabbis when seeing their name as givers to causes championing children, education, and volunteerism. Bobbi grew up in Brooklyn, surrounded by loving family. Raised by a teacher, she was steeped in the importance of education and became a teacher herself. When she was in Houston, she was one of the early chairs of VIPS, Volunteers in Public Schools, a program HISD still uses this day to vet and register school volunteers. A lifelong learner, Bobbi earned a doctorate in education and was a master teacher at the University of Houston Clear Lake School of Education for 20 years and went on to become a premier teacher of teachers, helping teachers learn to write so they could in turn teach their students to write. Bobbi also immersed herself in adult Jewish learning, and I've always been happy to see her face at lectures, seminars, and classes around town. Bobbi's volunteerism has been a tremendous gift, not just in the realm of education, but in our Jewish community as well, and she served as the president of the board of the ERJCC. In our coffee meetings to catch up and stay connected, Bobbi joyfully shares beautiful stories of her trips and adventures and beams with such delight as she keeps me up to date on her amazing children and grandchildren who fill her life with endless love and pride. On this special Shabbat, we are deeply blessed. Will you please welcome to the Bima, Emmanuel member and my friend, Bobbi Samuels.
Good evening. When I think back on my childhood, one image I have of my mother is her sitting in a big chair with a very thick book. My mother was a reader who never went anywhere without a book. I suppose there's no question that my mother influenced my love of reading. Her suggestions of books to read were always excellent, and both my parents always encouraged my reading. Over the years, I've come to believe strongly in the importance of reading as the key to all learning. Through reading, we learn history, geography, philosophy, science, psychology, empathy and understanding, and we use our reading skills to solve math problems. Reading introduces us to the world around us, and through books, we come to understand people and places and ideas. My grandparents, my mother's parents, were a major factor in forming my Jewish identity. My grandfather put the honey on the spoon of Jewish learning. Every Sunday morning, when I was in elementary school, I would get up and dressed, and then Grandpa would arrive with lox and cream cheese, whitefish, and bagels. Fully energized after breakfast with him, I took the bus with him to Beth Sholem People's Temple, the Reformed congregation where my parents had met in a youth group. Not until I was a parent myself did I realize what a gift my grandfather made to me, and especially to my parents who got to sleep late. All elementary school students in Brooklyn were sent home for lunch. Because our mothers worked, my mother was a teacher, my cousin and I went to my grandmother's apartment for lunch daily. Nana often prepared Jewish specialties like blintzes or kreplach for lunches. Whenever I talked about a friend or mentioned someone who had done something, or certainly when I went out on a date when I was older, Nana would say, is she Jewish? Nana's food and her question, embedded deep in my consciousness from an early age, planted a seed of Jewish identity. Of course, it was much more than Nana's lunches and questions and Grandpa's lox and bagels that formed my Jewish identity. It was a watering and fertilizing of that seed in my family's belief system, in my parents' identification with Jewish organizations, in my religious school education, my growing up first in Brooklyn, New York, and then in Teaneck, New Jersey, where I had a substantial number of Jewish friends, and then at Brandeis University. In high school, I participated in a small post-confirmation class, there were 3 of us, with my rabbi, where we explored Jewish values in more depth, and I began to understand the importance of education to Jewish people and the Jewish values of tzedakah, social justice, and learning. I began to recognize that in Judaism, the most respected person is the learned rabbi, not the rich and powerful businessman. We're taught that one of the most important commandments is to educate our children. We say, teach these words to your children, speaking of them when you sit at home, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. We say that in Deuteronomy and in our services every time. Brandeis was an obvious choice of college for me. There I continued to be soaked in the broth of Jewish beliefs. Brandeis stimulated my intellectual pursuits, challenged my thinking, inspired my connection to social justice activities, and led me to Vic Samuels. We met freshman year, were together most of the time we were at Brandeis, and married a week after graduation. Both Vic and I decided to pursue careers in education after Brandeis. We both had mothers who were teachers, fathers named Irving who were accountants. Irving Samuels' love of prophetic Judaism touched all who knew him and influenced Vic and then me deeply. Pop truly lived a life inspired by the words on Emmanuel's walls inside. He loved justice and mercy and walked humbly. Vic was always my biggest encourager and supporter, and together we worked through our lives to improve Houston's education, as well as education in Israel, through the work of the Leo Beck School, led by Vic's brother, Bob Samuels. We both believed, as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory said, education, the ability not merely to read and write, but to master and apply information and have open access to knowledge, is essential to human dignity, the basis of a free society. Important words today. It didn't take long for Vic to find the bureaucratic world of public school teaching too stifling, too test-oriented, and rule-driven. Known as an entrepreneur from his childhood, selling popcorn and delivering newspapers, mowing yards, collecting hangers during the war effort, Vic soon had a job in Houston in the corrugated box business. We discovered he could make money in the business world and still devote hours to community service. Over the years, both of us became involved with efforts in our community devoted to education and to Jewish education too. Our early political efforts in the late 60s and early 70s with Citizens for Good Schools resulted in the overturning of an extremely right-wing Houston school board, and a move toward peaceful integration of Houston's public schools. We made a difference, although I know it's not a permanent one. I believe that children are our future, and for that reason I've put my adult energies into improving education so that all children have the best education and the best opportunities to be the best that they can be. I've learned the importance of early childhood education to set a child on the path to a successful future. Research has proven that early childhood education has meaningful impacts on a variety of long-term outcomes, including high school graduation rates and future happiness. The National Forum on Early Childhood Policy and Programs has found that high-quality early education programs can yield a $4 to $9 return for dollar invested. James Heckman showed a return on investment of more than $7 for each dollar invested. In one of my activities at the Houston Children's Museum for 20 years, I chaired a committee where we chose an outstanding early childhood educator. Visiting classrooms, I can always identify the children who have not attended some kind of preschool program. They're the ones who are unable to sit to listen to a story, who don't know how to interact with other children, who tend to be disruptive rather than productive. I started out teaching high school English, then focused my doctorate in teaching at University of Houston Clear Lake on teaching adolescents and young adult literature. I now put my energies into programs for young children. Collaborative for Children, the Children's Museum, Children at Risk, the Jewish Federation's early childhood programs, and other organizations that serve young children have become a focus of my volunteerism and my philanthropy. As Vic and I got older, we established the Samuels Family Foundation for our philanthropy. He and I initially made decisions about where we wanted to invest our money based on where it could be most effective in helping children in our community. When Vic died, I was able to put a significant amount of money into our Samuels Family Foundation and to fully engage my sons and daughters-in-law in the process of Tikkun Olam. Fortunately, their values coincide with mine, and together we focused on education, primarily for young children, on social justice, on children's health, and on Jewish identity. Each of my children has become involved in community activities in both the Jewish and non-Jewish world that support our values with their time as well as our treasure. And as my mother used to say, I'm busting my buttons with pride over all of them. Where's the time gone? My grandchildren are graduating from college and taking their place in making the world better. I think of the Jewish story about the old man planting a tree. A stranger comes by and asks why he's spending so much energy planting a tree when he'll never get to enjoy its fruits. Someone planted trees for me, he said. My grandchildren will enjoy it. Both Vic and I hope to plant trees for our grandchildren and for our great-grandchildren to enjoy. I hope to see my grandchildren take up the challenge of Tikkun Olam and our Family Foundation's work as their parents have. When Rabbi Silk asked me to deliver this sermon, I was very reluctant. There's so much work to be done in the world of education, and particularly reading education, that I don't feel I've accomplished very much. This crazy world we live in today assaults children's learning and assaults us in so many negative ways. My lifetime has been focused on books and reading, teaching, spreading the Jewish values of education, particularly my love of reading that my parents and grandparents fostered. I'm very uncomfortable standing up here telling you about what I've done. But the things I've done, each of you can do in your own way. Follow your passions. I believe that each of us has to do something. Whether your passion is health care, or justice, or homelessness, opportunity for all, animals, the environment, voting, Jewish identity, or reading and writing, there's a way to put your passion to work involving others. I hope my stories encourage you to take that first step to volunteer a little more time and energy in making your own dream happen. Shabbat Shalom.
Bobbi, thank you for saying yes. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, your heart, and your inspiration on this special Shabbat that will lead us into a year of doing something.